The fluorescent lights flickered in containment level 7, casting an eerie glow over the sterile chamber. Carthos 9 was never meant to be comfortable, not for its staff, and certainly not for the 150 species of apex predators imprisoned within its 9 subterranean levels. Kara Niven stood before the security panel, her fingers hovering over the biometric scanner. How she had managed to obtain clearance to enter CL7 remained a mystery. Security Override 7B had inexplicably activated, granting her temporary access to the most enigmatic section of the facility. The timing couldn't have been more fortuitous or more dangerous. Identification confirmed. Kara Niven, Xenology Academy, Earth, Xenolinguistic Communications Specialist, announced the metallic voice of the facility's AI. Warning: Containment Level 7 houses high-risk apex predators. Proceed with caution. The massive door slid open with a pneumatic hiss, revealing a dimly lit corridor lined with reinforced observation chambers. Kara's heart raced as she stepped inside. CL7 was notorious throughout the Galactic Alliance, the place where the most mysterious and dangerous predators were kept under the strictest containment protocols. She moved toward the chamber at the far end, drawn by the data she had been analyzing for weeks. Inside lay VX-91A, a Vorak, a tiger-like creature with crystalline claws and scales that shimmered like polished obsidian. The beast had been severely wounded during its capture, and despite the facility's advanced medical technology, it was dying. As Kara approached the observation window, she could see the Vorak lying on its side, its massive chest rising and falling in labored breaths. The electromagnetic field designed to suppress its aggression hummed quietly, bathing the chamber in a pale blue light. Something wasn't right. According to all the data, a Vorak should be thrashing against its restraints, fighting until its last breath. Yet this one lay still, its crystalline eyes fixed on the window as if it knew Kara was there. Without fully understanding why, Kara pressed her hand against the door release. Warning sirens blared immediately. Warning! Protocol 17C violation. Electromagnetic suppression field disengaging. Warning! Direct contact with apex predator strictly prohibited. The door slid open, and Kara stepped inside. The Vorak's eyes followed her movement, but it made no attempt to attack. Instead, it emitted a low, rumbling sound. Not a growl of aggression, but something altogether different. Kara knelt beside the massive creature, her training from the Xenology Academy guiding her movements. Slowly, cautiously, she placed her hand on the Vorak's head. Its scales were warm to the touch, and it leaned ever so slightly into her palm. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'll stay with you. You don't have to die alone." The Vorak's eyes, crystalline orbs that had witnessed countless stars, focused on her face. Its breathing steadied momentarily, and it made that peculiar rumbling sound again. This time, Kara recognized it not as a threat, but as a form of communication. Behind her, the security cameras whirred as they recorded every moment of this unprecedented interaction. Throughout the facility, alarms blared. Security breach CL7. Unauthorized contact with specimen VX-91A. All security personnel to containment level 7 immediately. In the security center, Captain Gorn Vess, an insectoid with a hardened carapace and even harder principles, watched the footage with mounting horror. "What is she doing?" he hissed, mandibles clicking in agitation. "That thing could tear her apart in seconds." Beside him, Dr. Rin Thola, a reptiloid researcher with scales the color of burnished copper, stared at the monitors in disbelief. "The suppression field is at minimum levels. The Vorak should be in a state of aggressive panic. This behavior contradicts all our data." The holographic projection of Chairperson Zara, a Zephyrian whose gelatinous form rippled with concern, appeared above the console. What protocol failure allowed this human to enter CL7 unaccompanied? And why isn't the Vorak attacking? On the monitor, they watched as Kara continued to stroke the dying predator, whispering words of comfort as if it could understand her. The Vorak made that strange purring sound again, its vibrations registering on the facility's sensors as a distinctive frequency pattern. "Captain Voss," Zara's voice quivered with urgency. "Retrieve Ms. Niven immediately. Dr. Thola, prepare a full analysis of the Vorak's behavior. This incident violates every containment protocol we have established." As Captain Voss assembled a response team, arming them with neural disruptors and stun batons, Kara remained oblivious to the chaos she had created. Her entire focus was on the Vorak, whose life force was ebbing with each labored breath. "I'm here," she repeated softly. "You're not alone." The Vorak's eyes began to dim, the crystalline light fading like stars at dawn. With what seemed to be its last reserves of strength, it produced a series of vibrations, a pattern so complex that the facility's sensors struggled to interpret it. Kara leaned closer, her ear nearly touching the Vorak's mouth. What she heard would change everything. The security team burst into the chamber, Captain Voss leading with his disruptor raised. "Step away from the predator, Ms. Niven, now!" But Kara didn't move. She remained kneeling beside the Vorak, tears streaming down her face as she looked up at the armored figures surrounding her. "It spoke," she said simply. "It asked for mercy." The news of Kara's encounter with the Vorak spread through Karthos 9 like wildfire. Terminal screens throughout the facility displayed footage of the human kneeling beside the apex predator, touching it without fear as it lay dying. In the committee's emergency meeting chamber, tensions ran high. The Apex Containment Committee, responsible for overseeing all Predator facilities across the Galactic Alliance, had convened an urgent session to address what many were calling the Niven incident. Chairperson, Zara's gelatinous form pulsed with anxiety as they addressed the assembled members. For 6,000 years, the Alliance has maintained that apex predators are incapable of higher cognitive functions. Our entire containment system is built on this premise. If Ms. Niven is correct, if these creatures are indeed capable of language and empathy, then we have been systematically mistreating sentient beings. Dr. Rin Thola stepped forward, a datapad clutched in his scaled hand. "With all due respect, Chairperson, one anomalous incident does not invalidate years of scientific research. The Vorak was heavily sedated and dying. What Ms. Niven interpreted as speech could easily have been neural misfiring or respiratory distress." Captain Gornvass nodded in agreement, his mandibles clicking rhythmically. "The security breach is the real issue here. How did Ms. Niven gain access to CL7 in the first place? If we allow unauthorized personnel to interact with apex predators, we risk not only their lives, but the entire containment system." From her seat at the end of the long conference table, Kara listened to the debate with growing frustration. Finally, she could remain silent no longer. "The Vorak communicated with me," she stated firmly, rising to her feet. "I've been studying xenolinguistics for a decade. I know the difference between random noises and structured communication. What I heard wasn't just sounds, it was language." "Impossible," Dr. Thola scoffed. "Our neural mapping indicates that Voraks lack the brain structures necessary for complex language processing." "Your neural mapping was conducted on heavily sedated specimens whose brains were being constantly disrupted by electromagnetic fields," Kara countered. "How can you accurately assess cognitive function under those conditions?" A murmur ran through the committee. Several members exchanged glances, their certainty visibly wavering. A young crystalline mediator named Kristar leaned forward, light refracting through his translucent form. "Perhaps we should consider the possibility that our understanding is incomplete. If Ms. Niven is right, The implications are profound. What exactly are you proposing? Zara asked, their gelatinous form rippling with unease. Kara seized the opportunity. Give me unrestricted access to the Vorak for 48 hours. No electromagnetic suppression, no chemical sedation. Let me attempt to establish communication without interference. Absolutely not, Captain Voss exclaimed. Without suppression, any surviving apex predator would immediately attack. That's the point, Kara insisted. I believe they attack because they're in pain, because they're frightened. The Vorak didn't attack me when the suppression field was lowered. It chose not to harm me. The debate raged for hours, with the committee deeply divided. Finally, a compromise was reached. Kara would be granted 48 hours with the Vorak under minimal supervision, with emergency protocols ready to activate at the first sign of danger. As she left the meeting, Dr. Thola caught up with her in the corridor. You're risking your life on a hunch, he warned, his scaled brow furrowed with genuine concern. Kara met his gaze steadily. Sometimes, understanding requires risk. If I'm wrong, I'll accept the consequences. But if I'm right, if these creatures are sentient beings capable of communication, then everything we've been doing here is wrong. Thola's expression hardened. Just remember, Ms. Niven, science is built on data, not intuition. I'll need empirical evidence, not just your interpretation of growls and purrs. You'll have your evidence, Kara promised. And then, we'll see what your data is really worth. The next morning, Kara entered CL7 carrying a vibrational structure analyzer, a device designed to capture and decode the complex frequency patterns produced by the Vorak's vocalizations. Without the electromagnetic suppression field, the chamber felt different, less sterile, more alive. The Vorak lay on its molecular bed, its breathing labored but steady. As Kara approached, its crystalline eyes tracked her movement, alert but not aggressive. Hello again, she said softly, setting up her equipment nearby. I'm going to try to understand you better today. I need you to make those sounds again. If you can. For several hours, Kara worked methodically, recording the Vorak's vocalizations and analyzing their structure. Behind the observation window, Dr. Thola watched skeptically, making his own notes about what he clearly considered a futile exercise. By late afternoon, Kara had established a pattern. Each time she spoke specific phrases, the Vorak would respond with a distinctive dual-tone growl that mimicked the vibrational pattern of her speech. It wasn't random. It was mimicry, the foundation of language acquisition. I'm here with you, she would say, and the Vorak would produce a rumbling sound that, when analyzed through her equipment, revealed a remarkably similar frequency pattern. Dr. Thola remained unconvinced. It's a respiratory reflex, not language, he insisted when Kara showed him the data. The Vorak is simply reacting to sound stimuli. But Kara persisted, refining her approach and gradually building a rudimentary lexicon of Vorak vocalizations. By the end of the first day, she had mapped several consistent patterns that corresponded to basic concepts: pain, fear, rest. Captain Voss grew increasingly anxious as the experiment continued. If it regains strength without the suppression field, it could become dangerous, he warned during his hourly security check. It's choosing not to be dangerous, Kara countered. That's the point. It understands that I'm trying to help. The breakthrough came near the end of the second day. Kara had been working with the Vorak for hours, gradually introducing more complex phrases. Exhausted, but determined, she leaned close to the creature's head. I forgive you, she whispered, a phrase she had been repeating periodically throughout the day. The Vorak's response was unlike anything she had heard before. Using her sensitive microphone, Kara captured a series of vibrations that, when played back and analyzed, formed a crude approximation of galactic standard. "For give." Kara's heart raced as she replayed the recording. There could be no mistake. The Vorak had attempted to repeat her words. It wasn't just mimicking sounds. It was trying to communicate. She immediately called for Dr. Thola and Captain Voss. When they arrived, she played the recording for them, watching their faces as realization dawned. "It could be an acoustic anomaly," Thola suggested weakly, but even he seemed shaken by what he had heard. "Run whatever test you need," Kara challenged. "But you know what this means. The Vorak understands language. It's trying to speak." Captain Voss paced nervously, his mandibles clicking in agitation. "If this gets out, the entire containment system will be called into question. The Planetary Council will demand answers." "They should," Kara said firmly. "If apex predators are sentient beings capable of communication, then we've been imprisoning and experimenting on thinking, feeling creatures." Word of Kara's discovery spread rapidly through the facility. The committee convened another emergency session, this time deeply divided. Some members, led by Dr. Thola, argued that more tests were needed before any conclusions could be drawn. Others, particularly the crystalline mediators, insisted that immediate action was required to address the ethical implications of Kara's findings. Captain Voss demanded Kara's immediate removal from the project, claiming she had become emotionally compromised and posed a security risk. But Chairperson Zara, facing mounting pressure from both the committee and the Planetary Council, made an unprecedented decision. "Ms. Niven will conduct one final decoding session," they announced, their gelatinous form quivering with the weight of the decision. "All committee members will observe. If she can demonstrate conclusive evidence of communication, we will reevaluate our entire approach to apex predator containment." The stage was set for what Kara privately termed the ultimate decoding session. The following morning, she entered CL7 accompanied by Dr. Thola, Captain Voss, and a team of crystalline technicians. All suppression technology had been temporarily disabled, creating an environment as natural as possible within the confines of the facility. The Vorak lay on its molecular bed, its chest heaving with each painful breath. Despite their best efforts to stabilize its condition, it was clear that the creature was reaching the end of its life. Kara approached slowly, her vibrational analyzer ready to capture every nuance of the Vorak's response. Behind her, the committee members watched through the observation window, their expressions ranging from skepticism to nervous anticipation. "Why do you growl when you're captured?" Kara asked clearly, kneeling beside the Vorak. "I want to understand your language." The Vorak's crystalline eyes fixed on her face, and it produced a series of vibrational pulses that her equipment immediately began to analyze. The translated output appeared on her screen. Pain, agony, hatred. Kara continued, encouraged by the response. "Do you understand that we didn't mean to hurt you?" More vibrations, more complex this time. "Cannot. Trust. Enemy." Dr. Thola leaned closer to the screen, his skepticism visibly wavering as he watched the translations appear. Captain Voss stood rigid, his hand never far from his disruptor. The session proceeded smoothly for nearly an hour, with Kara gradually establishing more complex communication with the Vorak. Then, without warning, a spatial quiver disrupted the carefully controlled environment of CL7. From the shadows emerged a sinuous form, a Dravix, known as the Shadow Serpent, a species capable of limited phase shifting that allowed it to move through solid matter. Somehow, it had escaped from CL5 during the facility's period of heightened activity and security disruption. The Dravix lunged toward the Vorak, its intentions clear. These two species were ancient enemies, and the opportunity to kill a vulnerable Vorak was too tempting for the Dravix to resist. Captain Voss reacted instantly, drawing his disruptor and taking aim at the intruder. But in the confined space, with Kara positioned between him and the Draviks, any shot risked hitting her as well. In that moment of crisis, Kara made a decision that would define her future. Instead of fleeing to safety, she positioned herself between the Draviks and the dying Vorak. "Don't shoot!" she shouted to Captain Voss. "Let it hear the plea for forgiveness." The Draviks hesitated, its serpentine form coiled and ready to strike. In that moment of pause, the Vorak emitted a series of vibrations that resonated throughout the chamber. "I thank you," the translation read, before the pain became too much and the creature slumped back onto its bed. Kara cradled the Vorak's massive head in her arms as blood the color of liquid crystal seeped from its wounds. Its breathing grew shallow, each exhalation weaker than the last. In its final moments, the Vorak's eyes remained fixed on Kara's face, a connection that transcended species and language. Then, with a soft exhale, the light faded from its crystalline eyes. The Vorak was gone. Captain Voss stood frozen, his disruptor trembling in his hand. He looked at Kara with a mixture of contempt and fear. "You let it die this way? If not for your interference, we could have saved it with temporary suppression." Dr. Thola consulted his datapad, his scales paling with emotion despite his professional demeanor. The trauma was too severe. Neither suppression nor its absence would have made a difference. He paused, struggling with the implications of what they had witnessed. "But why did you want to hear its final growls rather than—" "Rather than what?" Kara challenged, tears streaming down her face. "Rather than letting it die drugged and confused, unable to communicate its final thoughts?" Through the observation window, Chairperson Zara's holographic projection watched in stunned silence. Behind them, the entire committee and representatives from the Planetary Council had witnessed the Vorak's death and its final attempt at communication. In the hushed chamber, Kara remained kneeling beside the Vorak's body. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of both grief and conviction. This Vorak, though a predator, knew how to ask for forgiveness. It could feel compassion from others. I told it that no one should die alone. Now, before all of you, I say, you have treated him as a research specimen for a decade without ever asking what he wanted. The emotional impact of her words resonated through the chamber. Committee members, who had once upheld bureaucratic protocols with religious fervor, now stood with tears in their eyes, confronted with the consequences of their actions. After a long silence, Chairperson Zara's voice trembled as they spoke. "The committee has reached a decision. Kara Niven will become the voice of beasts, granted direct access to all living apex predators in CL7 to establish a communication registry." Captain Voss and Dr. Thola exchanged incredulous glances, but they could not dispute the directive. The Planetary Council had witnessed everything, and their support for this new approach was overwhelming. The transformation of CL7 began immediately. The sterile containment chambers were redesigned as communication hubs, with all suppression devices removed and replaced with monitoring equipment designed to facilitate rather than impede interaction. Kara stepped into her new role with a mixture of determination and reverence. As the officially designated Voice of Beasts, she was responsible for establishing communication with more than 60 different species of apex predators. Her first interaction was with Nithra, a wolfristic, a crystalline wolf-like creature whose claws could slice through solid steel. Once called the Fur Demon for its ferocity, the Nithra revealed a startling truth when Kara engaged it in conversation. Ice horses fled from home because hunters came to steal territory. It communicated through vibrational patterns that Kara's equipment translated. "Here, I thought I met hunters, yet you ask what I want. Next came Dravix, the shadow serpent that had nearly killed Kara during the climactic confrontation. Now contained but no longer suppressed, it lowered its head in acknowledgement when Kara entered its chamber. "I hated Vorak for thinking he participated in killing my kind," the Dravix admitted through a series of undulating movements that Kara had learned to interpret. "But I did not understand. Later, I discovered I too was wrongfully captured because of my phase-shifting form." Each encounter revealed similar stories. The Skarn, dragon-like creatures captured for defending their territory. The Velkor, energy-based feline entities separated from their offspring. The Athari, luminous birds imprisoned for harvesting light crystals that humans had claimed as resources. Kara meticulously documented each communication, gradually developing what she called the Heart Language Matrix, a comprehensive translation system that mapped the emotional and linguistic patterns of each species. Dr. Thola, initially skeptical, gradually shifted his approach. He began working alongside Kara, applying his scientific rigor to her intuitive methods. "If they are free, the facility could be at risk," he cautioned during one of their daily briefings. "They're afraid because they've been isolated," Kara explained. "If we treat them as beings with rights and dignity, they won't attack without provocation." Captain Voss found himself challenged by the very creatures he had once guarded with such rigid authority. During a security assessment, Dravix confronted him directly. "You are mistaken if you think only suppression guns prevent us from being dangerous," the serpent communicated through Kara's translation matrix. "When you first met me, I was suffering from isolation. Now I can cooperate because you treat me with respect." Chairperson Zara, exhausted but committed to the new paradigm, prepared to present their findings to the Planetary Council. "We must transition from a containment model to a diplomatic model," they announced. "This represents a new era in interspecies relations." Kara took the lead in organizing an open conference, bringing together representatives from the apex predator species, committee members, Planetary Council delegates, and interstellar ambassadors. The event marked the formal announcement of the Containment Abolition Declaration, which recognized apex predators as intelligent subjects with rights to freedom, compensation, and participation in the cultural and political life of the Alliance. The transition wasn't without challenges. Conservative factions within the Alliance bureaucracy sought to reverse the decision, labeling Kara a traitor to human interests. But the security forces, once the enforcers of the containment system, now stood firmly behind her, having witnessed firsthand the transformative power of communication and respect. 7 years passed, and Carthos 9 underwent a complete metamorphosis. CL7, once the most secure and feared section of the facility, became the interspecies communication hub. The containment chambers were preserved as a memorial hall for species that had died in captivity, with a special monument erected for Vorak, now known as Vorak the Dreamer, with an inscription that read, "He taught us to listen." Kara, officially recognized as the director of the hub, but universally referred to as the Voice of Beasts, now oversaw communication with more than 60 different apex predator species. The quiet, intuitive woman, who had once defied protocols to comfort a dying creature, had become a symbol of empathy and understanding throughout the galaxy. Dr. Rin Thola had embraced a new role as Chief of Beast Language Research, voluntarily dedicating himself to cooperation rather than containment. His scientific methodology, combined with Kara's intuitive approach, had led to breakthroughs in interspecies communication that extended far beyond apex predators. Captain Gorn Voss, perhaps the most transformed of all, now served as Diplomatic Protection Squad leader. His security expertise, once used to enforce isolation, now ensured the safety of dialogue between species that had once been mortal enemies. Chairperson Zara had been elected as senior advisor on interspecies relations to the Planetary Council, using their experience to prevent conflicts rather than contain them. The impact of these changes rippled throughout the galaxy. The home planets of Vorax and other species welcomed back their long-lost children. Some worlds had been devastated by predatory warfare, but the return of apex predators helped restore ecological balance. The Galactic Alliance established the first Interspecies Reconciliation Treaty, encouraging all planets to respect the rights of intelligent subjects, no matter how distant or different. Kara became a sought-after speaker across the galaxy, a symbol of peace who helped dismantle the prejudice that dangerous entities were merely wild animals. On the 7th anniversary of the Vorax death, Kara sat in the memorial garden of Karthos 9, beside the stone monument to Vorak the Dreamer. Young Nithra cubs played in the dawn light, their crystalline fur refracting the sunlight into rainbow patterns across the garden floor. In her hands, Kara held the second edition of the Heart Language Matrix, now expanded to include communication protocols for hundreds of species, once considered too dangerous for interaction. She closed her eyes, listening to the rustle of leaves and the whisper of the wind, sensing the spirits of the apex predators who had passed through this place of transformation. "I once thought I was just a small woman in a vast galaxy," she reflected, her voice soft in the morning air. "Now I know that when we truly listen, every being, no matter how large or small, has a story to tell, and their voices will never be forgotten." From the garden, the view expanded outward, revealing the countless worlds of the galaxy, where the voice of beasts had sown seeds of hope and understanding. Worlds that had once feared the apex predators, but now welcomed them as partners in a new era of cooperation and respect. The end of one story had become the beginning of another, a tale written not in the language of containment and fear, but in the universal dialect of empathy and recognition. In listening to the voice of a dying predator, Kara Niven had taught an entire galaxy how to hear the hearts of those they once called enemies. Throughout the known universe, the legacy of Vorak's final words continued to resonate. Forgiveness, even in the face of suffering, could transform worlds. And Kara, the woman discovered cradling a dying apex predator, had become the vessel for that transformation, the voice of beasts, who had shown that the most powerful force in the galaxy was not technology or weapons, but the simple act of listening with an open heart.